Welcome everybody, midway through day 2. How are we feeling? Excellent. So welcome to this panel, bringing readers back, and we're going to talk about real-world tactics for combating news fatigue and news avoidance. These are very closely related concepts. And this session builds on one that Ellen, Heinrich and myself did last year, where we identified 7 practical strategies for combating news fatigue and news avoidance. And we're both, I think, interested in not just sort of vague talk that you often hear at industry conferences, but real-world examples with metrics attached to show what is working and what isn't, or at least those things that bring out learnings that could be useful in a practical sense. And to that sense, to that end, we have a set of inspirational examples from my fellow panelists I'm going to introduce now, including, to my left, Angela Pacienza, who is executive editor of the Globe and Mail in Canada. Next to her, we have Inanna Lallerstedt, who is senior product manager at Svenska Dagbladet, which is part of Schibsted's Swedish operation. And Ellen herself is going to share examples of some of the work she's been doing with German publishers and elsewhere, as well as part of her work as director of the Bonn Institute. But just before we get into the examples, let me just sort of briefly recap some of the problems. So the extent of news avoidance and news fatigue with data from our research at the Reuters Institute. I should introduce myself, shouldn't I? Nic Newman from the Reuters Institute, senior researcher. Always forget to do that. So this is from our 2024 report, and what we found last year was across countries, almost 4 in 10 of us say that we sometimes or often avoid the news. And that's actually the highest level that we've ever recorded since we started tracking in 2017. And when you sort of look at and you talk to people about this in open comments, you can see many of them are related to things like the wars going on in the Middle East and Ukraine, the sense of powerlessness that many people feel, summed up by this comment, how are we supposed to function when all we see are bad things in life, and then obviously everything that's going on in the world right now in terms of the US stock market, falling stock markets, economic protectionism, it doesn't stop. And all of that has sort of compounded a lot of these feelings. So there are lots of different reasons for this. There's no single cause, no single solution, but it's worth reminding ourselves about just some of the top reasons why people say they avoid the news from our most recent data. So number 1 is that sense of negativity, that news essentially brings down your mood. Many people say that they shut off from the news at certain times of day or try and restrict the amount of news. Then there's just that overload, you can't get away from it, it's coming at you 24 hours a day. It's exhausting. Linked to that, the sense that there's too much coverage of politics, too much coverage of wars, and that many of those important stories are squeezing out that broader agenda, that especially in a digital environment, so other kinds of stories that might engage younger audiences, for example. Then there's nothing I can do about the information, nothing I can do with it. It causes arguments, the list goes on. The news doesn't feel relevant to my life is a really big one, particularly with younger people. And I think this last one is really interesting, particularly when you look at the age differences. So pretty much in every country, we see that under 35s are twice as likely to say that the news is hard to follow or understand. And some of that may be about the way in which we consume news in sort of fragments now, rather than from start to finish in linear stories. But maybe also just the way we write is too complicated. We take too many assumptions. And I think Inanna's presentation, which you'll hear in a minute, really sort of directly addresses some of these issues around hard to follow and understand. So this is another chart from our latest data, which just shows those differences by country and just shows how extensive this problem is around the world. So we're going to hear from each of our panelists in turn with a presentation. But first, I just wanted to check with each of you, just checking on the problem. So Ellen, first of all, how do you see these issues? How are German publishers seeing these issues of avoidance, but also sort of disconnection?
I think...
Just press that.
I'll press the button. doing this for the first time. We get a lot of discussions around news avoidance with German publishers right now, but I would say they could be more nuanced. So people have understood in the industry that there is something like news avoidance, but we very often see that the blame is still on the customer. So why do people avoid our precious news products? Is still something that we encounter every now and then. And the existence of news avoiders, news outsiders, is something that is pretty much unknown. So that there are a lot of people out there who are not avoiding us, but who have never ever considered to consume the news by established media outlets. So I think that's also something that needs to be included into the discussion today.
Yeah, so it's a complex, multi-layered problem. And Inanna, I always think of Nordic countries as sort of largely immune from many of these problems. But yeah, what are the conversations that goes on in your newsroom?
Well, I guess we still see the trend in the Nordics, even though it's less serious than in other countries. We still have a high share of the population that takes part of the news and that actually also still pays for the news, which is, of course, a fantastic thing. But I think we're very conscious of which direction the trend line is pointing in. And I think we also have an opportunity right now to sort of do everything we can to keep our readers with us, because I think it's easier to keep them than to gain them back. So it's also, I think, a time where we have to be extra motivated and work extra hard to be relevant for our readers.
Angela, I know in Globe and Mail you sort of think about avoidance and news fatigue, slightly different things. Yeah, what have you been thinking about?
I guess I think about, I mean, you can interchange these, but I think about avoidance as news events like we can't always control, but on the fatigue side, I can do something about that as a newsroom employee or editor, whereas I can't control when or how a certain president makes, announcements about tariffs or takes them back or what. I can't control that, but I can control the setting that we're presenting that information in.
Right. So let's move into the presentations, and as I said, each of our panelists has prepared some real-life case studies with some metrics attached about some of the responses to some of the challenges that we've laid out. So Angela, you go first.
Sure.
Bringing Beaters back in Canada.
Sure. So a little bit of just what the Globe and Mail is. We are based in Canada. We cover all of Canada, and we also have a lot of foreign correspondents. We're a paywalled publication, and we still have a newsprint product that we do, a daily newspaper as well, as all our digital products. So bringing readers back, if we rewind 2.5 years ago, I was on a medical leave from work, and I considered myself a real news junkie. And while I was off, I found with every day, I just couldn't go to our app. It was depressing, and it made me feel awful, and I just fell into this hole. And when I came back, I was like, there has to be something I can do about this, that we can do as an organization to really help our readers. And I watched your excellent panel, and I based my business case very much on all of the things. And so I sort of looked at it as a way to test a bunch of theories that you had presented last year. And so that's what I'm gonna go through. So these were like the outcomes that I was hoping for. I always think about, what's the outcome I want, and then how do we sort of get our newsroom there. So I really wanted to change the mood of our landing pages, and I think of that as our newsletters, our mobile site, but also like our alerts. I think of the alerts are sort of a conversation you're having with your readers all day long. What is the personality we're putting forward on that? I really wanted to think about ways we can make readers smile and not just panic. And I also just wanted to show our readers, we already did a lot of lifestyles type content. We just weren't showing it to the readers. And instead we were showing them, 20 articles about a war, 20 articles about, some other depressing thing. How, there were multiple wars going on. We have an election right now. There's, the US issues that are going on. And so this was an opportunity for us. And so how we did it. So I knew, going into this, we sort of knew that there was not going to be just one way that we can do it, and we needed resources to do it. So we moved a group of reporters that were all covering news, and we said, we have too many people covering the same thing, let's move them over to this How We Live group. I did manage to get some funding for 5 new hires, which was very rare and exciting. And then the other thing we knew was that we needed to put a senior leader in charge. So I'm the executive editor at the Globe and Mail, and what we wanted to signal to the newsroom was that we take this just as seriously as we do our political and business coverage, and we're going to put, the editor-in-chief in his announcement said something like, I'm putting my third in command in charge of this is how important it is. And that definitely set the table for how the newsroom was going to react to it. We changed our UX, and so we positioned this type of content within the core product. So we didn't treat it like a second-tier type of content, which I know, which is what we used to do with it. We were like, yes, we have it, it checks a box, but we weren't presenting it as something we felt was important. We changed all our alert rules. We also changed how we did our newsletters. And then we did like an owned and operated marketing campaign because we didn't have a lot of marketing dollars for this, but we knew that we could speak directly to our subscribers because that's free. And so we really tried to leverage all the things internally. And I'll show some examples as I go on. The other third part of this that I felt was really, well, we all felt was really important was just really creating a community. And so we started to really increase the number of Q&As we do, and we don't just do them about politics and business news. We make sure we do them about, how we live topics, things that keep parents up at night. So we did one last week or a couple of weeks ago about adolescence. I don't know if any of you have watched the show. It's very difficult, but it's about kids and what can happen with cell phone use. And we had our TV writer, we had a columnist, and then we brought on a child psychologist to also answer the questions. And so it was a really lively conversation. It's fascinating to read back. It also created another piece of content for us. And so it had many good uses with it. So when I talk about changing our properties, this is the top of our website. And so we think of it as 5 different packages. And so as you can see, it's like election, trade war, another war, a different kind of war, more political news, and then this 5th package, which we call Living Better, but we change the label all the time. But what we try to do with that label, because it's a really small thing, but we're trying to change the mood and how you react to the other news around it. So we're creating, I sort of think about it as if you have a dinner party and you want to bring really cool people who will complement each other, and it'll be a fun, engaging night. That's how I kind of think about this. And I think just the label Living Better is already a hopeful word. It already puts you in a bit of a different frame of mind. Now, underneath these 5 packages are a whole lot more news articles. And so what we wanted to do is say, when you're scrolling on your phone or on our homepage on desktop, you don't want to get to article 20 before you read or feel something hopeful. And that's how we were going to get around this idea that I want to just avoid, I'll come and read the one thing that I need to read, and then I'm going to leave because my brain can't handle it, my heart can't handle it. So this diner series, I should also say, got us, we were shocked. I think it got 30 subscriptions, which I did not expect from a photo gallery about an old diner in Toronto. So either people were really desperate for something that day, or I don't know, but it was great. We created a whole bunch of new beats. Some of these were external hires, and some of them were just repurposed people internally. So advice and service editor is someone who really, her one and only job is to go and seek things that keep people up at night. So she started a column with a doctor called Ask a Doctor. In Canada, we have a problem right now where we have 6 million people who don't have a family doctor. And so we thought we could speak to that issue rather than doing an institutional story about government not being able to find doctors. Let's just get a doctor and give them some real advice. And so people can write in. Sounds really simple, but we also are doing it with we call it the sleep whisperer, because everyone is having problems sleeping, including me last night. And then we did food culture reporter, healthy living reporter. I want to talk a little bit about our happiness reporter. So this was a woman who used to cover mental health. And so for about 5 years, she wrote about all our mental health issues with the pandemic, how suicide rates among teenagers was really high. You name it was like one depressing story after another, quite frankly. So what we did was we said, you're still gonna do mental health, but we're gonna call you our happiness reporter. And it completely shifts how you approach the stories and the tone that it does. The other thing that it does, and I hadn't anticipated this, is when readers see Erin Anderson, happiness reporter, like they automatically smile. And they write to us to tell us this. And so just seeing her byline automatically changes their mood. And so these are just like little tweaks we can make internally already that just change that atmosphere that you're in. The Time Reporter is another one that, I mean, I'm sure you can guess what some of the other ones do, but the Time Reporter, her job is, the thing, we asked the newsroom, like, what do you talk to your friends about on the weekend? What do you talk to your girlfriends about over coffee? And everyone's like, oh, we don't have enough time to do anything. But it's not something we were covering in the newsroom, and so we made that her beat. Like, go cover Time as though it was politics or it was any other beat. And so she's uncovered a fascinating amount of stories. And both her and the happiness reporter, we were only gonna do it for a year as a test, but both of those reporters have so many ideas and the audiences have responded so well that we're like, keep going, not taking that away. The other thing that we did that I thought was really important was a visuals editor. Her singular job is to focus on these beats and make sure that we have really, really good visuals so that we can build very visually stimulating article packages, but also, and different article formats. So she does a lot of the photo galleries in conjunction with some of the reporters. Lastly, the health team, we had one person covering health post-pandemic. We upped that to 5. So we brought it back to the pandemic levels. And, you know, they're covering all kinds of things. You know, we've got someone focused only on women's health. We've got another person focused on chronic diseases like cancer, brain health, diabetes. Again, these are issues that we all talk to our friends and family about, but they weren't always covered as a beat the same way that politics would be. All right, so this is a little bit of what it looks like. So you can see Erin Anderson, happiness reporter. We really upped our illustrations. This story about Costco. Do you guys know what Costco is in Europe? Okay, you do, okay. So it's like the big warehouse where you can buy things in bulk. We sent our generations reporter. So our generations reporter covers like millennials, Gen Z, everything you think that would be. So we said to her, like, go to Costco and treat Costco shoppers like a generation and see what happens. This story, I think, is gonna end up being our #1 story of the year. Like, by the time, it shows up on every report since it was published, and it's insane. Like, I cannot believe it. And so my big joke is I'm actually, if I had more funding, I would create a Costco reporter who would just go there every day, but I did not get yes to that, so, okay. And then, okay, so some of the results. So the journalism has been great. We've had a lot of really good, some of our alert open rates are at 10% for this type of content, which a lot of our other alerts are like 5%, 4 and 5%. And the positive comments, so I just wanted to show this. A lot of thank yous, a lot of, you know, these stories are more vital than ever. It really builds loyalty with our readers. They have noticed that we have started making a change. So that has been very good as well. And then this is my favorite because it shows that our big gamble paid off. So the gray line is what we had, our best guesses of what we were gonna do with traffic. And you can see that the yellow line is what our actuals have been for this type of content. And it's just like blown all of our predictions out of the water, which is, yeah, is great. And then the other thing that, in terms of traffic is our page views year over year are up 305% for this type of content. Month over month, it was 73%. Unique visitors are up 74% year over year. And those are numbers we never had seen for this type of content. So I will pause there.
Thank you so much, Angela. That was amazing, because I think what's interesting about that is it's not just one thing. You know, you're essentially using broader agenda, but in a very strategic way, but you're also bringing community and a whole range of the other things we've talked about, and it's sort of bringing together some of the labeling, changing the perceptions of audiences. So there's lots of really interesting things to get our heads around. So we're going to pass on now to Sweden and the work and her team have been doing to address some of the challenges, especially around, as I mentioned before, engaging young people and other hard-to-reach audiences. Inanna, you're going to talk about your project, Compact.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, let's see if I can figure this out. Great. Yes, I'm going to talk about SVD Compact. It's like a spin-off product we did almost 2 years ago from our main product, Svenska Dagbladet. And the tagline is read less, know more. The reason we created this product was that we basically identified a couple of challenges, and now it's really nice because I've had a great introduction from Nic mentioning these numbers that I'm about to talk about. But one thing we see is that, I think I'm missing some slides. Okay, well, one thing we saw was basically that people are starting to opt out from the news. And it's just like you talked about, Nic, that people are both opting out, but also experiencing a lot of anxiety and fatigue from the news cycle. I think we can all relate to that, especially during these times. So we just started to have a feeling that we need to do something, or at least try and do something about this. We also noticed that a lot of news services look very similar. So like if you are quite honest and like remove the logo on the top and some of the branding, it would be very hard to tell us apart, I think. And I actually looked at our front page and how it's been looking for the past 25 years. And it's not perhaps the most radical development that I've seen. And I think that's true for many of us, right? So we've been doing the same thing in the same way for a very long time. We also talk a lot with our users, and when we meet them, we also notice, especially I would say among younger users, that people are talking about consciousness around screen time, right? I know at least I get stressed when I look at my screen time on my iPhone. It's very high. But what we see is that people both are trying to be conscious around the screen time, but also actually conscious around how many times they check the news. So people are starting to make mental health choices where they are opting out from us, which I think we need to take really seriously. So if the news cycle is experienced as both being stress-creating but also quite similar, we thought that maybe there could be an opportunity for us here in this space. So we set out a few different aims in the beginning of this project. We said we want to expand our reach, so we want to reach new readers, new users that are within our target group but that we haven't had a relationship with before. And it sounds perhaps a bit like ambitious to say like we're going to battle news fatigue, but I think we have to dare to try, and I think we have to keep trying over and over again and probably fail 99% of the times, but I think we can't give up even though we see this negative trend in terms of interaction with the news. So the third point here is that we also said that we need to challenge ourselves, and I think that's sort of on the same topic, so that we need to actually start trying to do things differently, even though it's really hard. And I think, at least me coming from a traditional newspaper, there's so much old habits and assumptions that we have with us, based on things that we have done really, really well for a really long time. But I think we need to start to be better at trying to challenge ourselves and trying to question why we do things the way we do them, and start to do them differently. So, based on sort of this problem identification and also these aims, we decided to create SVD Compact. It's a standalone news service. It gives the readers news at a moderate level, so it's like short and sweet, but still gives you an idea of what is going on. It also is for people that appreciate a break from the negative news flow. And it's for us for a relatively like younger segment, and that's like our users are kind of old, so people have different views of what young means here in this context, to be honest. I'm going to show you a few of the concepts, just how the product looks. We have a newsfeed. We discussed this a lot, like should we even have a newsfeed in this product, or should it just be like different types of news stories? But we said that it's kind of weird if the king dies. In Sweden, we still have a king. It's kind of weird if the king dies and you can't see it on the site. Like that maybe gives the reader like a bit of a weird vibe. So we have a newsfeed, but you can filter it. You can filter it of most important today, most important yesterday, but also there's a button called tired of the news. So they would just take away all the news and only give you like the good, constructive, positive stories. And we also have like a card swipe section. This is one of our most loved and interacted with products, where we like talk about something that the editorial staff thinks is interesting right now, or just like a random fun fact. Then we have a section called One Topic, 1 Minute, where we, as it's called, go through a complex topic in 1 minute so that you can learn something new, but it doesn't take too much of your time. And then also sliding into an expert's DM, where we basically ask an expert something about the topic that's relevant right now. And it's actually a really good format, I think, because experts tend to want to talk about things like in a quite long manner, no offense to anyone. So this is a way for them to also actually have to really like summarize sort of the essence of the matter, which is really nice, I think. Yeah, we've done this for like 1.5 years, and in that time we've had 50,000 signups. 63% of those are actually new users to Svenska Dagbladet, which we are really, really happy about. The feedback is 75% positive. And I think some of the reflections we have after working with this for 1.5 years is that it's so good for us to challenge old assumptions. It's just, it's hard, but it's changing also our other editorial products. It's changing how we write. It's also impacted how we organize our editorial staff. So I think it's really taught us how to work in new ways, which is so important. And then I think an important learning here is that we've done this as a separate destination, as a separate product, and that has been really good for keeping the innovative sort of level. But we also see it's really hard to keep a product separate from your sort of regular news flow. So what we are looking at now is starting to actually integrate more of our content into our regular product. And then we do see the challenge that like positive news is unfortunately harder to create engagement with than negative news. So we are still working on that, and I think an important learning here is really that introducing positive news into the mix can have a really strong impact. So we actually see extremely high numbers when we put compact material on our regular front page. So that's something that we are exploring right now and testing, which is really interesting. Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you. Read less, know more. And I mean, I think really impressive to just get new users, and you've really proved that you can attract new users with positive news. And the challenge, many of the same challenges, how do you broaden the agenda, the new formats, really interesting. And I know that Ellen also has been thinking about some of these challenges in Germany. So you're going to talk about 3 things that you've learned over the last year.
Yeah, absolutely, and thank you so much for your fascinating examples from your respective newsrooms. The Bonn Institute is not a newsroom. We are a non-profit company that is helping news organizations to rethink journalism and also to try out new things, to innovate on the content level, as we like to say. And, well, we figured that during the discussions about bringing readers back, bringing audiences back, one thing is very often missing. There's one white elephant in the room, and that is the emotions of our audiences. So we as journalists are very much used to targeting people's minds. We are very much used to trying to get the facts right and to really aim at people's cognitive brains. And we tend to forget about people's emotions, and we should keep in mind that trust, for instance, is an emotion. And news avoidance is also a result of emotions such as feeling overwhelmed, feeling helpless. And I believe we should really rethink the way we practice journalism in a way that also includes emotions. But what do? We're turning our backs very often on the users, on our audiences, because we're so preoccupied in figuring out new processes, new tools, new formats, new platforms we want to get on, AI. And while we are chasing AI, I believe we should also do something. I'm saying also because, of course, it's really important for us as an industry to stay technically up to date. But at the same time, we also need to do other things, which is really take our audiences seriously and figure out how to produce journalism content that really matters to them, that is really important to their lives, that is engaging, that is helpful, and maybe even counters all the feelings that arise during challenging times, such as hopelessness and frustration. So for us, it's really important to, think journalism as a service that puts people at the center of everything we do. And I'd like to come up with 3, good practices that have turned out to work very well, also for the media companies that tried them out. And as the Bonn Institute, we always try to center all of our activities around 3 ingredients that we find are very often missing when newsrooms consider to develop new products, which is solutions, perspectives, and dialogue. And of course, as you can see, they are all interlocked. You cannot consider them separately, and they have to be found in the entire news organization, which means you cannot just consider, say, solution-orientedness as a format. It does also have to be found in the way you lead, in the leadership style of your organization. Because in news organizations, people do also have emotions. So everything I'm telling you about how to bring readers back is also about how to, evolve a media organization that is capable of bringing readers back. So let's look at the first example. That is a program that we are currently running with 9 local newsrooms all over Germany. And so we are practicing with them solutions-oriented local reporting. And at the same time, we're tracking how user behavior is changing, because we know from a lot of projects we've done before that it is really valuable, not just for our audiences, it is also paying off for media organizations themselves. So we are combining user analytics, AI, with hands-on approaches. We're literally telling journalists to develop new skills, to train their solutions-oriented muscle. We use a lot of methodologies that have been practiced successfully by the Solutions Journalism Network, and we try to really help newsrooms to find the relevant stories that really matter to people on the ground, in order to finally better monetize their products. And what we are seeing is it really pays off. So in a previous project, we could see together with Rheinische Post, which is a regional newspaper, that people spend significantly more time with solutions-oriented articles. The reading time went up, and also the number of sessions, and there was all articles behind their paywall. So they were really able to keep their subscribers happy, and that's so crucial in a time where churn rates do really matter. They have to go down. Second example, I'm going through the slides really quickly because I know time is scarce, and we'd also like to hear from you. Perspectives. So I visited a national newsroom which has just relaunched their digital strategies and operations, Der Stern, and I was really amazed by a video series that they have launched. And that turned out for them, surprisingly, to be a huge success. It focuses entirely on the stories of women. They actually figured out that almost any story, any political or any other story on Earth can be told via the eyes of a woman, a mother, and that's exactly what they do. So it's very slow video reporting. You just listen to what the woman has got to say. You don't hear any expert who puts something into context. You don't get any other, commentary. Just listen to a woman who has overcome tremendous challenges in strength. So I think that's a great example of how we can just, switch perspectives a little bit. I cannot recall a single other format that has so rigorously focused on the perspective of mothers, while, not trying to be toxically positive. They really center out all the struggles and they show women in strength. And this has really also been a big success for Der Stern. It's their most successful video format ever. It's always like the strongest video they publish every week, and they'll double down on it. So they are planning, newsletters and podcasts and other formats because they have discovered that this is like really, really paying off for them. Third example. That's again something that the Bonn Institute is working on, a dialogue. So we've developed a new dialogue format and we've tested it last year, and now we continue bringing it to maturity. It's called 1 Hour, Many Voices. We have seen that journalists are traditionally very much thinking in binaries, so we are so much used to think in pros and cons and black and white, and we think in times of polarization and decreasing trust in the work of journalists, who are often seen as the ones who are even amplifying differences in our societies, we should do something about it. And we are bringing people together at a table, just 5 people, real names, real conversation, and we add a journalist. And this journalist is just at the service of these 5 people. He helps them have a constructive conversation. He helps them listen and understand new perspectives that they might not agree with, but that is really important to understand. And actually, it's not just something that is beneficial for society and democratic dialogue, it's really beneficial for the journalists themselves. So we train them ahead of these events. So we teach them how to listen, basically, because that's something that's really lacking in journalism training. So we're very much, as you can see, very much trained in talking, but not so good at listening. And that's something that we see it has got a lot of value. We evaluated this as well and asked people, would you like to participate again? Would you recommend this format to friends and family? And everyone said yes. So that was a great experience. I'd like to add just one little thing. We didn't get extreme voices to the table. So we got 80%, those people in the middle who very often say, I better keep my mouth shut when it comes to polarizing topics, and who often complain that in these times you cannot say, speak up your mind anymore. And it's for us so important to encourage these people to really have a conversation and to understand the different perspectives, because this is so crucial for democracy, but it's also paying off for media companies, journalists who can really, develop a new muscle and become the glue of our societies and help people have difficult discussions in very difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. 3 very detailed real-life examples with metrics, and you can hear in those presentations also the passion for the different solutions. It's not one problem, it's not one solution. But I just want to pick up on, I really like the framework as well in terms of solutions, perspectives, and we heard a lot about perspectives, human perspectives, broader stories, and then dialogue as well. I'm interested in dialogue and community. You said we're not very good at listening, we're good at talking, but Angela, to what extent do you think about that? For example, with your new beat reporters, I mean, to what extent is dialogue, do you think, important? Is something that newsrooms know how to do?
Yeah, we've been experimenting with our happiness reporter goes into the comments on stories and replies to people and just tries to listen and let that guide the follow-up stories or what the next thing might be. That's also why we've been doing the Q&As with our readers so that it really forces reporters to listen to what the questions are, and it starts to kind of sink in as they're answering those questions. And the hope is that it will be a continuous conversation, and so it will prompt future story ideas that are based on those conversations that are happening.
Right, and we know younger people from the research also are much more interested in that sort of, not just a one-way street, but actually that sort of dialogue.
Yeah, and I think for Compact, what we have done is that the editorial staff has a much clearer personality in the content, and already there the feeling is that you build a relationship with the readers so that you can both write like quite light topics, but you can also write about serious things, but in like quite a personal manner. And I think that's like an interesting start for dialogue to be more sort of visible for the reader. And I would say that actually the reader feedback, like the email inbox is like very nice for the Compact editorial staff, which I think is quite unique.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the challenges with this, Ellen, is how do you scale community? Because you've got to do the journalism as well.
And at the same time, I really think this constant thought of scaling is really one of the big problems we're having in the media industry. So you can only bring one reader back at the time. You really have to earn trust. And that needs a lot of patience and some time and dedication. And you cannot fix this with a new tool. So I think this is something that needs to be learned very urgently, and that journalism can be so much more than publishing by scale. It can be conversations, and the publishing comes later. But the publishing is worthless when you lose your audience. So we really have to work on that as well.
I just wanted to ask a little bit about some of the culture problems of introducing these kind of techniques or new apps into changing people's workflow and processes. Maybe if you want to just pick up first, Angela, because, I mean, happiness reporter, how did that go down with hard-bitten newsrooms?
It was actually pitched by the reporter who's doing it now,
Okay.
because when we gave a talk about how we have to change the type of journalism that we're doing and offer more hope and offer more relatable content. I think the email that came into my inbox was, I was up till 3 a.m. and I have all these ideas, And so we started to shape it. But I think the way that you get culture change is the same way that we have seen over the years in terms of like, how did you get video reporters to do video or audio or whatnot? You have to put people in charge of things so that they can provide reporters like safe spaces to do this kind of work. So I have 3 managers whose singular focus is making sure that reporters don't fall back into the habit of pitching very depressing stories. And so when they have story meetings, one of them in particular, she's always like, okay, who's got a fun story? Who's got a story that's going to delight me? And then they also talk about, can we reframe that story idea? So like one example, which, is an example from a few months ago is, a reporter said like, oh, cell phones on schools in Canada in particular, a lot of the school boards are starting to sue the platforms and whatnot, the social media platforms for sort of polluting our kids' brains and whatnot. And so, you could write the story of like, oh, schools are overrun with cell phones and here's all the scientists and the facts of why it's rotting everyone's brain. Or you could say, how one teacher got students to put away their mobile phones during class, so it's the same story, it's the same topic, it's the same issue. We've just really reframed it into a more positive way. And so the idea being that anyone who's a teacher is probably going to read that story, and anyone who's a parent is also going to read that story, and probably people who are students are going to read that story. And so suddenly, like, you've opened up your audience potential so much more than just, here's yet another story with your lead and 3 scientists talking about why cell phones are bad.
Ellen, just more generally, do you find that it's still a battle to get newsrooms to do that, to take a story and reframe it? Is it easier just to sort of slip back into the old habits?
I have to say it's getting easier and easier because we've got the evidence in place. You can see it from your subscription, from reach, from time spent. So the more digital newsrooms turn, the better arguments we have. And that's exactly why we do also user analytics during our training programs, because we need to show that this is really paying off. It's not just for, being morally superior or doing something for the public good. This is, unfortunately, should be, but it's not convincing enough for media CEOs and editors-in-chief. So we have to add something, which is monetization. And we can actually show now that many newsrooms I'm talking to are really confirming that constructive, solution-oriented, less negative content does really pay off for them.
I think that's why the metrics are so important, to be able to show there is a business case for this as well. And Inanna, just from your perspective, you're producing these really cool formats, which presumably people quite like, but probably not on their main website, right? Because they still want to write long articles, and it's challenging culturally for journalists, right?
Yeah, I think the ongoing discussion of format length and type of format will go on for a long time. But I think the shifts in the coming years, it's just going so fast. I see we're starting already to talk about liquid content, and then the length of what you write suddenly won't matter anymore, and that's kind of scary.
Very challenging for journalists.
Extremely challenging, but for us it's been such a good exercise to start to actually write these shorter formats, and to be very disciplined about writing them. And I think in the beginning, the editorial staff working on Compact, it was so hard for them to do it, but then they really got into it, and now they do it like it's completely normal. So I also think it's just about testing new habits, basically, and doing it over and over.
And some of these new apps, they may not last, but what they're great at is culture change, actually.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
I'd like to open it up and take some questions. Let's go here. If we can get a microphone to the middle, that would be great.
Hello, my name is Gökşen. I'm a media business professional from Brussels. Thank you for the great panel. One of the aspects of news media avoidance is also linked to the users going to social media platforms increasingly to consume the news. And also not just the social media platforms themselves, but also the news influencers. So my question to you, I'm so inspired by all these great initiatives. I would like to understand in what ways you are using social media channels as part of your initiatives, and also if you have any experience with partnering up with influencers. I would love to hear those experiences too. Thank you so much.
I suppose part of the thing that you're trying to do is to be different from news influencers, to show that you can make formats more accessible, but you don't necessarily need to do things in exactly the same way as a news influencer would do. But Angela, Inanna, what do you think?
So I'm going to cheat a little bit, or not cheat. I have an easy out for the social aspect of it. In Canada, Meta has banned news links, and so we don't post to Facebook or Instagram anymore, which, yay. And that actually, because no one sees, no one in Canada, if any of you go into Canada, you will be blocked of all news sites. It caused more Canadians to go back to owned and operated, and so we've actually doubled down on our owned and operated as a result, which has been a really positive. I should thank them for that. I probably won't, but and then I would say though, in terms of influencers, we're just trying to think of our reporters as influencers a little bit more, and we're trying to also show the audience that the work that goes into our story. So the amount of we tend to include more often. We interviewed this many people, and this is why we're experts on this topic, which I don't think we see in the flash of the pan of TikTok. It doesn't mean we're not on TikTok, but when we go on TikTok, our reporters generally tend to say how they made the piece of journalism, right? I interviewed 30 people. I went to this, I read this much. Yeah.
But it's the personality-led part of being a beat reporter,
absolutely.
Which is kind of similar to an influencer in many ways, whereas yours is about formats are very much influenced by social media, right?
Yeah, I would actually say that Compact translates really well into social media. So we are both on TikTok and Instagram, and it's actually outperforming our regular accounts. So we are keeping quite an open mind about exploring those platforms, I would say, and with quite good results so far. Absolutely.
I think I'm getting the message to wrap up, unfortunately. I'm just going to ask Ellen, though, if you could redesign journalism from scratch, bearing in mind all this stuff, how would you do it differently?
Well, I think I'd really change journalism education from scratch. Yeah, I think we need to start with the, yeah, I think so, because that's the only way we can do it. And then I'd really add some skills that are not being taught yet in journalism schools, which are very, very valuable these days when we have to deal with people who are constantly under stress. So we do need to pick up some skills on how to handle people who are living in a very stressful environment, and we could learn from psychotherapy and mediation, actually.
Okay. Any other thoughts on things we could do? If you could redesign journalism from scratch?
I need another hour. I think I would just really question every single thing that you do in your newsroom right now and every hour that you spend, and whether it's to the outcome that you want.
Yeah, and I think dare to not take ourselves so seriously all the time. I think that's a good starting point. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you very much to our panel, Ellen Heinrichs, Inanna Lallerstedt, and Angela Pacienza. Thanks very much.